This is being recorded, so if any of your friends could come and would like to see it, it's on the library website. Thank you to Patrick, the one who's recording it for us. So we're just going to get started. Oh, one more thing. We will have the speakers, and Jean Ravenel is our moderator. We will have the speakers and their cards in the back. If you have any questions, you can write them on that, because we're not going to take questions. We're not going to have you speak from the floor. So I will start the introduction.
Who's going to run the questions up to me? Is that going to be you?
League members, Mary Ellen, where are you?
Okay.
She's there. She will collect it. And Joanne and Kim will collect them. So just keep your eyes out for that. There are pens and cards in the back. So I was just married when the Supreme Court struck down the law that made it illegal for anyone in Connecticut to use birth control, including married couples. After listening to The Wheelhouse a few weeks ago with Frankie Graziano, it occurred to us that most people are not aware of the history as well as the protections that women in our state now have for their reproductive health. So our League of Women Voters of Southeastern Connecticut decided to sponsor a local program here to alert women locally about what is being done to protect them. And as I said, a recording is going to be on the Groton website, Groton Library website. This is the League's position on reproductive rights. The League of Women Voters of the United States believes that public policy must affirm the constitutional right of privacy of the individual to make reproductive choices. The League also believes that every U.S. resident should have access to a basic level of quality health care at an affordable price, including abortion. And we are delighted to have the Attorney General of Connecticut, William Tong, here, and Alma Nunley, who's his lawyer on reproductive health, correct?
Special Counsel on Reproductive Rights, yes.
Special Counsel on Reproductive Rights. And Gretchen Raffa, who is in charge of Planned Parenthood for Southern New England, will be here. She's having a problem with her dog. So she will be here, and she will be, I guess, the last one to speak. And I want to thank Lori Fernand. Where's Lori? Lori, who was just wonderful in helping us put this together. And also the Groton Public Library with Anne. Where's Anne? And also the Groton Public Library was terrific. So thank you all, and without further ado, we will get going.
So I know this is being recorded. Does that mean I have to sit here, or can I stand up? All right, good. I'm used to standing up and moving around a little bit. I like to do my Donahue or Oprah thing, but increasingly I find that the young people don't know who Donahue or Oprah are. It's great to be with all of you. Thank you, Irene. Thank you to the League. Thank you to the Groton Library for having us here. I'm honored to be here with Alma Nunley, who's Special Counsel for Reproductive Rights. What that means is Alma knows a heck of a lot more than I do and does all the work. I did threaten Alma that I might just give her the mic, but I'll spare her that, and I'll do my song and dance first. But you'll forgive me if I have to lean on Alma a little bit to answer some of the questions. And I know Gretchen's on her way. She's a great partner, as are all of the organizations and activists who are involved in this conversation and in what is now a major civil rights fight. It's very personal for a lot of us. And let me just say at the outset, Irene, you mentioned women. This is 100% about women and patients, but it's also about men, okay? And this is our fight too. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that part of reproductive freedom, a big part of it, is the ability of couples and partners and families to make the right decision for themselves and to have the personal freedom and liberty, which I still believe is guaranteed by the United States Constitution, that men are part of that conversation too. And I don't think men should be let off the hook that easily either, right? So let me just start by saying it's hard to do this in 20 minutes to cover the whole landscape. So I'll cover a few things, and then I'll open it up to questions and whatever you want to talk about. But suffice it to say, Irene gave some historical context. I'll give you my own. I was born a month before Roe was decided. So until Dobbs, I had only lived in a country my entire life, and my sisters, and frankly my mom as an immigrant. We have only lived in an America in which abortion was safe, legal, accessible, and constitutionally guaranteed. And that all changed overnight with the Dobbs decision. We had seen it coming, obviously. There was an accumulation of cases, and just so you know, the Attorney General's office is in all of those cases, even if we're not a plaintiff or a defendant. Attorneys General or states acting through their attorneys general are often part of these cases because either we're asked to weigh in or we weigh in as amici through amicus briefs. And Alma does a lot of that work when we engage in courts across the country. So after Dobbs was decided, Tish James and I and a whole bunch of other attorneys general, all Democrats, went to Texas for a meeting. We meet all the time in person. And one of the activities on our itinerary was to go to Austin, Texas, which is a purplish, bluish part of Texas, and to go visit a women's healthcare clinic. So we got on a bus, we went to this women's healthcare clinic. It was in a, suburban-y part of Austin in a nondescript, strip mall kind of block. And when we walked in, it was empty. There was one staff member, the last remaining staff member. And what we were told was, not 6 months or a year before, this place was jam-packed with people, patients, women, families, doctors, nurses, administrators, providing not just reproductive health care, abortions, gynecological exams, but other work, other health care for women that didn't have access to health care. This was a place that they could go in Austin, Texas. And it was full of life, full of people, right? Life-affirming health care. That's what this place provided. They like that word life, by the way, right? And this is life. This is people caring for each other. But when I went, I saw the absence of life. It was cold, lifeless. We went to an exam room, took a picture. Saw an exam table that hadn't been sat on by a patient for months and months. Instruments that were unplugged, cold, useless. Waiting rooms, recovery rooms, totally empty. That's what reproductive health care looks like in many parts of this country. Okay, Texas. This discussion is not just about a reproductive rights and a civil rights issue. This is a war on American women and patients. And Texas is the front. And on the front, what I saw with my own eyes is that healthcare is abandoned. It's shuttered, it's boarded up, and people are left not just to their own devices, but sometimes they're left to die. And so at this healthcare clinic, we met Caitlin Cash. You may know of Caitlin Cash's story. But Caitlin is a Texas mom who, I think in her second pregnancy, she miscarried, I think the first time, if I have that correct. Her second pregnancy, it was discovered that that her fetus had a fatal fetal anomaly and that it would not survive after birth. Every time she moved, she risked breaking the bones of this fetus, and it was not to be. And so she wanted to consider her reproductive health care options, right, and pursue an abortion. And she was not allowed to do that in Texas, and so she had to go to Kansas. And she experienced this firsthand, not being able to access health care. Fast forward to her third pregnancy, I think, she miscarried again in the parking lot of a Texas hospital, and they wouldn't see her. And we know of women who have literally bled out and died in the parking lot in Texas because they wouldn't be seen by doctors. Now, how is that consistent with the Hippocratic Oath? I don't know. But that's the world we live in. And so when I came back from that experience, it's obviously disconcerting, it's heartbreaking, it enrages you, but it also gives you focus, right, about what's at stake, and that we have a lot of work to do. So after that, the far right launched an attack on a drug called mifepristone. Everybody knows what mifepristone is, right? You wouldn't be at this discussion if you didn't know what mifepristone is. So mifepristone is medication, it's medicine, it's 1/2 of the regimen for a medication abortion, which is 1/2 of all abortions in this country. And so a ban on mifepristone is nothing if not a federal ban on abortion. And so this is what I would call them, zealots, anti-choice zealots, tried to accomplish. They tried to go to federal court in Texas. They picked just the right judge in Amarillo, Texas, a federal judge, to ban mifepristone, which he attempted to do. But we were not going to be on defense anymore, after not just Dobbs, but Little Sisters and other cases. Yeah. We were tired and done with being on defense, so we went on offense. And we went to federal court in Washington state and filed our own case. And we said not only should mifepristone not be banned, but that the FDA has erred in not making mifepristone even more accessible to people because it's been used safely by millions of American women and patients. And we went into court and we won. And we got an injunction in that case, which stands to this moment. But there's my friend Gretchen. Gretchen, come. How's your pooch? How's the dog? Yeah, I have, my dog's had a rough go of it lately too. But we went and got this injunction, and now mifepristone is tonight safe, legal, accessible in our 18 states. But that's not all of us, right? That's just 18 states. And then there's, of course, the red states in a country in which healthcare is not available to millions upon millions of American women and families. So that's where we are today. In the middle of all of this, states have used their own sovereign power, Texas, Missouri, to try to punish and criminalize abortion in their states, and then to go into other states and to try to criminalize abortion. And so we responded in this legislature in Connecticut and said, hold on a second, just a reminder, everybody, constitutional law in 30 seconds. This is the sovereign state of Connecticut. What does that mean? That means we get to live the way we want to live. That's why we have a governor, a legislature, and attorney general. That's why we have our own criminal laws. That's why Rhode Island State Police can't come rolling into Groton and enforce Rhode Island law. We are joined together in a federation with 49 other states known as the United States of America, okay? People forget that, right? They lose sight of that. Sometimes people, right, Sheila, they think that we're this monolithic nation that only lives under one set of laws. Not true, right? 50 sets of laws and federal law. And Texas has no right to tell Connecticut what to do. So we have a shield law that says just that. Texas, Missouri, stay the hell out, okay? And we can talk about that more. We want to make some improvements to the shield law, not just to protect women inpatient and reproductive health care and abortion, but also gender-affirming care, okay, for our trans family and friends and community, and the LGBTQ plus community. And we want to do some additional things. For example, we want a state-level FACE Act. What does that mean? We want to protect people when they try to go to a clinic or a doctor's office so they don't get abused or intimidated. We want to guarantee state-level emergency medical care, including the right to reproductive health care and emergency abortion if necessary. So we have to strengthen Connecticut's state law. Even though we've enshrined and codified the holding of Roe versus Wade and the right to an abortion in state law, we still have a lot more work to do, particularly because other states are seeking to attack us. Before I turn it over to, I think Gretchen's next.
No, it's your AAG is
All
next.
right. Whatever you want. Freestyle.
I'm just here to cheer you on.
No. But I'll stall so Alma has time to think about what she wants to say. Where do we go from here? Okay, I could spend the next 10 hours telling you about my 50-day-long fight against the federal government so far, right? That's a different program. That's not tonight. So far, obviously, you know, this administration has put a target on the backs of immigrants, on the backs of medical researchers, colleges and universities, law firms.
Journalists.
He's going to come after all of us in this room. What we think will happen, the mifepristone case gives you a clue. They've zeroed in on this antiquated law known as the Comstock Act. Okay, the Comstock Act is 100 years old. It's still on the books, so technically it's still the law. You know, and it's many generations ago morality law that was passed to protect, the chastity of all the women in this room. Okay, and at a different time. And it says basically you can't ship things in the mail that assist in abortion. And so it was the Comstock Act that they zeroed in on in the mifepristone case, that you couldn't send it through the mail, mifepristone, to patients. But by the way, it also includes things like instruments that you might use, or diagnostic tools that you might use, or even cotton swabs and masks and gowns and, exam tables. If you unlock your brain to all of that, this has a potentially very broad and sweeping scope where the administration might say anybody who assists or enables an abortion or reproductive health care to take place, we're going to stop you from getting access to any of these materials, not just mifepristone. So we expect that it's obvious that is a place that they might go. Let me just say, we know that's where they'll go. We are ready for this fight. We will never, ever surrender in this fight, and we will never back down. And Democratic Attorneys General and Alma Nunley are ready for it. Let me just close before I turn it over. This is an extraordinarily dangerous time for our country. I don't have to tell you. And so taking a step back from reproductive health care and abortion per se. I want to thank the League for convening this conversation, but we need to have much more conversation, right, about our democratic institutions, about the rule of law. And sometimes those concepts are sort of up here. Let me just say, we have to have a conversation about checks and balances, right? And so when we go into court on the Comstock Act, when we go into court as we have to protect gender-affirming care, when we go into court to oppose the president in cutting vital federal funding for medical research in the National Institutes of Health, we, you, are a check on unlawful action, unconstitutional action, lawlessness by this president. And as long as we keep this a legal and process fight, I like our chances. Thank you, everybody.
I'm going to sit because I'm not as adept at this as my boss. And I will also say, so hi, if anybody came in late, I'm Alma Nunley. I am an Assistant Attorney General and also Special Counsel for Reproductive Rights. Can everyone hear me? Because I'm not sure if it's loud.
I'm not sure that mic is fully live.
Seems so. I just will talk much closer to the mic then. So I will also say that I have a co-special counsel for reproductive rights. There's two of us. Emily Gate, she couldn't be here today. She sends her regards. And I am so fortunate to be in a state with an attorney general who fights for women, who fights for reproductive rights, and I have the opportunity to do that. And women across the country don't have that, depending on what state they're in. And it's not just our fight, as the Attorney General just said, it's everyone's fight. And as the League of Women Voters, I'm so thankful to be here and speak with you, because it's so important to stay engaged on this issue, to pay attention to what's going on at the state level, on the national level. And it isn't just about abortion. So in attacking abortion, they're also attacking broader reproductive health care, contraception, family planning services that are essential services. And even if they haven't taken the steps yet this time, we know what they're going to do because they did it last time. They challenged and they fought against family planning services for Planned Parenthood in Connecticut. Because they provide abortions, they did not want them to participate in a federal program to provide family planning services to, Gretchen can speak to how many people across the state, but thousands of women in Connecticut for basic reproductive health care. And it's coming again. We know it's going to happen again, and we're ready. We were in court the last time. We'll be in court again on that. They are challenging how the Affordable Care Act is interpreted for access to contraception for women, depending on who they work for. We were in that fight the last time, and we'll be in that fight again. Some of it's still ongoing. And so I just want to broaden the picture a little bit to make sure that everybody knows that you may be a person who personally would never consider having an abortion, or don't know that you know someone that's had an abortion, although you probably do. But think about kind of these broader issues as well, and how that impacts everyone around us, and particularly as it comes up with gender-affirming care, we may not know of a transgender child, we may not know of someone who it's directly impacting, but it's impacting residents in our state. And they're coming for that care, and it is medical care, and we're fighting to protect that as well. And I will also just add, because I think it's important for Connecticut, a shout out to our legislature. We were the first state in the nation to pass a shield law in 2022. So we were there, and we'll continue to be there, and we'll keep fighting.
Oh, that's it? Keep talking, because I'm still thinking. No. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your patience. My name is Gretchen Raffa, and I am the Chief Policy and Advocacy Officer with Planned Parenthood of Southern New England, and also of Planned Parenthood Votes Connecticut, which is our advocacy and political arm. And I wanted to say that out loud, depending on where the questions go. I'm sorry I was late. I'm sure the Attorney General said everything that I might want to say in terms of the national context. And I have to start with Alma, you already said this, but like just a huge amount of gratitude to my friend, the Attorney General, and your entire team, which includes you, Alma and Emily, and we are just so freaking lucky to live in a state where the Attorney General and his team is, literally if I call, they pick up the phone. And I just want to say that out loud. I think you know that, obviously, if you know our Attorney General and you're here. But that's really important in this current political environment, to work in partnership and have a team like Attorney General Tong's team to support our communities, not just reproductive health and rights issues, but across the board, fighting for people's fundamental human rights and our basic freedoms every day. So just another huge thank you for everything that you and your office do. Because I also get the privilege of doing this work in 2 states, and we have an amazing Attorney General in Rhode Island. We cover 2 states. So again, I can't imagine being in Trump 2.0 world without our incredible Attorney General and your team for everything you're doing. I think probably one of the things I just wanted to highlight, I think obviously you all know this because you're here, this is a critical moment for people's health and rights in our country, and also bring it down to the state level where we still have people in our state that face barriers to accessing the health care they need. And I want to also talk about it in drill down the national context to what could actually be happening in the state of Connecticut as well. For folks that didn't see or don't read the Wall Street Journal, a story was posted earlier today that basically says that the Trump administration is going to do exactly what they did last time in terms of the Title X program. And this is the only federal funding program that is dedicated to what's called family planning, defined as really, reproductive health care, preventative health care services like breast and cervical cancer screenings, STI testing, birth control, that millions of Americans rely on across the country, but is their intent, once again, to, really go after their attempt to try to defund Planned Parenthood, and I do air quotes because basically that just means to try to shut us down across this country, using all their tools that they have and changing who is eligible, providers that are eligible to receive Title X funding. That means that people will be that are uninsured or underinsured that rely on programs like Title X to access preventative health care will not be able to necessarily get the health care they need if Title X providers can't continue existing across the country. In Connecticut, we rely on the Title X program to help ensure that, again, patients that are underinsured or uninsured altogether can get no-cost health care at Planned Parenthood health centers. In the state of Connecticut, that's about $1.89 million that comes into Planned Parenthood of Southern New England as the grantee. And if we are kicked out of the Title X program again, that's a loss of such critical funding for patients that need care, that are shut out of healthcare programs. So we're talking about people that might not qualify for Medicaid, can't qualify for other private insurance. It might be because of their documentation status. These programs are a lifeline to preventative health care. There are court cases about, and there's going to be one in front of the Supreme Court. So did you talk about Medina and Medicaid? Okay. I was like, I don't want to repeat anything that the Attorney General said, but next week, April 2nd, whenever that is, there will be oral arguments, and the case is a case specifically brought against Planned Parenthood of the Southeast, because the South Carolina government is saying that basically Planned Parenthood should not be eligible for Medicaid funds, to just like simplify it. And what the concern is, and the implications of this case that it will have, is that Planned Parenthood is a Medicaid provider, and if we get decertified through a court case as a Medicaid provider, that means we can't bill the government when patients that have Medicaid for their insurance come into health centers. So this case is really important. It has, it has the implications of impacting Planned Parenthood patients across this country, because if one of the tenets of the Medicaid program is freedom of choice of provider, so that patients get to choose what providers they go to for care with their Medicaid, and that's what's being challenged in this case. And so that means that, again, if Planned Parenthood is someone's provider, we might not be able to bill the government for the Medicaid service that we are providing. Which would have a devastating impact across the country if that is the case, where, you know, all of a sudden people that have Medicaid can't go to the provider of their choice. And again, for women, oftentimes Planned Parenthood or their reproductive health care provider, not always the Planned Parenthood in certain states, is their only healthcare provider they see, and it's their entryway into the healthcare system. So this Supreme Court case is really important. There are other court cases that have to do with Medicaid as well, and you heard the Attorney General talking about how important these court cases are and how important it is for his office to be fighting back against these court cases. But when we're talking about what's at stake on the federal level, it trickles down to people in Connecticut. About 45% of our patient population that comes through Planned Parenthood of Southern New England's doors have Medicaid as their insurance. So that has huge implications for the people that rely on Planned Parenthood of Southern New England every day. And so I'm going to talk about something not so sexy, and then I promise I'll shut up. But one of the things we're asking the state of Connecticut to do as well is to increase Medicaid reimbursement rates for providers like Planned Parenthood of Southern New England, because what we are also facing is unfortunately a budget deficit, because the cost of delivering care keeps rising, but the reimbursement rates for Medicaid providers across the state don't cover the cost of delivering care. So across the board, for the care we deliver at Planned Parenthood of Southern New England, we're paid about 51%. It covers about 51% of the cost of delivering care. That's just not a sustainable model to ensure the long-term sustainability of Planned Parenthood of Southern New England in the state of Connecticut. So if you get emails from me in your inbox and tell you to take action and urge, you know, the state of Connecticut and the legislature to fight for Planned Parenthood patients, we're asking the state legislature to increase Medicaid reimbursement rates so that Planned Parenthood patients can rely on their healthcare provider now and into the future. And it really does depend on the state government stepping in and ensuring that providers are getting paid so patients can continue to deliver the care. I have other state policies that I'll talk about later when you ask questions, but I will shut up there for now.
Okay, thank you all. This first question can go to either Attorney General Tong or Assistant Attorney General Nunley. And I'll ask it, and then I'll ask you to do one other thing. It says, are doctors in Connecticut protected from prosecution in other states if they provide abortion meds to people in states where it's prohibited? And I'd also like to ask you to explain possibly the difference between prosecution and extradition.
The short answer is yes, provided that you're licensed in that other jurisdiction. Okay, that's what our state law says, that you're protected. But if you administer reproductive health care through telehealth, for example, from Connecticut to Texas, you need to be also admitted to practice medicine in Texas. Right? That's what our law says.
Yeah, I can give the slightly longer answer.
Okay.
And so the slightly longer answer is we can't stop another state from bringing a criminal prosecution.
Right.
We don't have that ability, the same as they can't do that here. What we can do is our shield law currently prohibits courts from extraditing people that are being extradited to another state because they provided health care that was legal in Connecticut. We will not enforce summons for investigations. We have a rule that says that if there's a subpoena of healthcare providers for records related to reproductive health care, they don't have to provide those records without patient consent except under limited circumstances. So those are all ways that Connecticut can protect doctors in Connecticut, patients in Connecticut from actions in other states, although we can't stop other states from acting in their own state.
So let me break that down. even further as to why that's the case. Remember what I said before. This is the sovereign state of Connecticut. That's the sovereign state of Texas. Connecticut law doesn't apply in Texas as a general matter. Texas law doesn't apply in Connecticut. If Texas were to want to do something in Connecticut, first of all, if you're in Texas, you're subject to Texas law, okay? And if you're in Connecticut, you're subject to Connecticut law. That's obvious, right? You can't walk around and say, in Texas, I'm a Connecticut citizen, you can't touch me. That's not how it works, okay? If you're in their jurisdiction, you're subject to their laws. If Texas wants to come into Connecticut and do something, they have to ask for our help. They have to ask our courts to help them. They have to basically ask our permission. And there's a way to do it, but they have to ask our permission to enforce Texas law here in Connecticut. And it's up to us whether we grant that permission or not. Okay? So the way that normally happens is, you sue somebody or somebody gets sued in Texas and they have property here in Connecticut. Usually, if you win a court case in Texas, you can go to Connecticut and say, hey, the person who lost their court case lives in Connecticut. I want to execute on my judgment. I want to get access to their property. That happens every day. And that's possible, but they need our help. They need our courts to say, yes, that's okay, we'll let you do that. What we're saying in this context is, no, we're not going to help you with respect to you trying to enforce your criminal laws or anti-choice laws here in Connecticut. So that's a breakdown of why, of the extent to which we can protect people. The final thing is prosecution versus extradition. You can be prosecuted in Texas right now if you did something wrong in Texas or under Texas law. But if you're not there physically, they can't effectively sanction you, right? They can't put you in jail. They can't really make you pay a fine unless you're physically there. So in order to effectuate that, they have to come to Connecticut again and ask for our help and say, will you please extradite somebody, send them back to Texas for prosecution and likely incarceration or otherwise, and then it's up to us to decide whether we're going to do that. This also happens every day, and that is a request made of the governor and the attorney general, and I actually literally, when we extradite people, I have to sign a document saying, yes, we're going to extradite them.
Okay. This next question can go to any of the three of you. How much protection would we have in Connecticut if a national abortion ban is put in place?
So I don't think they can do a straightforward, full frontal national abortion ban through Congress. If they try, we will be the first to sue. Why? Because isn't that what the Dobbs decision says? So, hey, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, okay? The Dobbs decision, which is a decision I abhor, stands for a basic principle that the other side loves. It's called states' rights, okay? We Democratic AGs try to come up with our own version. We called it progressive federalism. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. States' rights. And so, how can you pass a nationwide ban on abortion, Congress, when the Supreme Court said it's up to Connecticut? So that's why I just don't think that's a serious enterprise. It doesn't mean that, Jim Jordan, Mike Johnson et al. Won't try. There's no legal basis for it.
And they're sneaky. So what they're really
They're
going to
really
do
sneaky.
is, as the Attorney General mentioned, they're going to find a way to take mifepristone off the market,
Yes.
because then abortion is legal, but it's not accessible anymore for medication abortion. They're going to try to enforce Comstock Act so that other supplies that abortion providers need to provide those services aren't available, or they're under threat of criminal prosecution. So they don't have to have a nationwide abortion ban.
Funding.
Yeah, funding too. They could. So already the federal government won't pay any money for an abortion. It's called the Hyde Amendment. But there are ways that they can try to challenge the state spending the state's own money as well. And those are all ways that there's no nationwide ban, but they could affect the same result, and we'll fight it.
How do you ban abortion in Connecticut from somewhere else? you cripple and dismantle Planned Parenthood, right? That's the indirect way of achieving the same result.
Which is, obviously why I'm talking about Medicaid a lot, but also that if there is any threats to the state because we use state Medicaid dollars to cover abortion care for people that have Medicaid, that is a real concern for us. And to your point, that is a real fear because, again, we need to be here for the long term for folks that need this care now and into the future. And that is the absolute strategy is to shut down Planned Parenthood. We are the largest abortion provider in this state. That's not the case in every state across the country. But if you attack it through Medicaid and Medicaid dollars, there's now 17 states that use their own state Medicaid funds to provide funding for abortion care, and that is another way they can, go after abortion. Or, one of the things we're concerned about on the federal level is gestational bans, and so basically, limiting when someone can have an abortion. That's a threat every year in Congress, which unfortunately in this Congress, who knows if that will actually go anywhere, but any ban on abortion is a dangerous ban because it means people can't access the health care they need. That should be decided between a patient and their provider. That probably gives me a little entryway to say we actually do have a ban on the books in Connecticut. I'm saying it publicly because it's something, in the context of bans, there are patients that have to leave our state because we were ahead of the curve in 1990 when we codified Roe in statute, thanks to people that came before me and fought really hard to ensure the right to legal abortion was protected. But we have a post-viability ban on the books in Connecticut, and we talk about it in the context of who is still limited to access care in Connecticut. And so these are conversations that we're having with lawmakers, which is why I'm saying it publicly with you, because I spend a lot of time, most of my day is talking to lawmakers, and they're talking to us about what still needs to happen in the state of Connecticut. What else, because we're talking about what are barriers to care here, because our job as Planned Parenthood of Southern New England is to advocate for patients to get the care they need that is legal in the state of Connecticut. So we're talking about breaking down barriers and strengthening laws on the books here in Connecticut. So I just wanted to bring that up in the context of conversations we're having on the state level, because right now a patient would have to, their life or their health would have to be in danger in order to have an abortion post-viability, where that's not always the case when a patient might decide that an abortion is the best option for them later in pregnancy due to, an unfortunate diagnosis later in pregnancy, that they might still have to travel out of state. And I think it's important for folks that care about abortion and abortion rights just to, be clear about what we're still working on in the state of Connecticut as well as strengthening our laws, which, the Attorney General and Alma already lifted up.
All right. One question that Ms. Raffa, I think, probably needs some clarification. One of the audience asked, what exactly is Title 10 and what does it cover? I should point out that Medicaid is Title 19.
Yes.
All right.
Sorry, I
That's
probably...
What's Title 10?
I will tell you what Title 10 is. Let me tell you what Title 10 is. So I've had lots of conversations today about other things, and then it was like, oh, the Wall Street Journal just announced this. Title 10 is the only dedicated federal funding stream for what's called family planning services. There's a definition. It's under the Office of the United States Health and Human Services. It was established in 1970. Bipartisan support historically over the decades until, well, not until, but usually there's a strong bipartisan support, obviously if the program's been around since the 70s. And what this program was established and why it was established in 1970 is because there was an increase in STI rates, sexually transmitted infection rates in the United States, unintended pregnancy rates, and the government did what the government, I think, should be doing, making sure that there are resources available for people that need the resources, and safety net, like safety net providers like Planned Parenthood have funding that is available to meet the needs of people of low income. And so this covers services like sexually transmitted infection testing and treatment, birth control, and again, for millions of Americans, the Title X program is the way that their birth control is covered. So in Connecticut, it works more like an operations grant. So what it does is cover the cost of care. It says if anyone comes in that's under 100% of the federal poverty level, and they don't qualify for Medicaid for some reason, or if they don't have private insurance, and they would qualify for the Title X program, and they get their care at no cost. So it helps offset the cost of delivering care for people of low income, and it's such an important resource, again, for the millions of Americans that rely on Title X providers. It's not always Planned Parenthood. In Connecticut, it is Planned Parenthood. All 14 health centers that we have in Connecticut are Title X providers. So again, if someone can't afford the cost of care, they are seen at no cost because of the Title X program. And again, big thanks and gratitude to the state of Connecticut, because we also have other state funding streams through the Department of Public Health that also help support STI testing and birth control at no cost for people that fall under 100% of the poverty level.
All right, this is a follow-up question. It probably goes to you first. Is there a real risk of birth control contraceptive coverage being pulled? If it is, what is your advice for young women in need?
Do you want to give the legal answer first?
I think that there's different ways that could happen, and really the one area where we saw in the first Trump administration and moving forward, and it wasn't really limited to Trump, is the Affordable Care Act provides that women have access to contraception under their health care plan. It's a required coverage, but certain religious institutions didn't want to cover that. So there was a lot of litigation. That litigation actually is still ongoing in court. But as the administrations change, the willingness of the federal government to defend that changes as well. So there's a real threat under that provision of the Affordable Care Act. More broadly, it would take more work to get rid of contraception, but what they can do is make it less accessible.
And then I would just add to one of the things that we've, because I'm going to put a plug for another state policy issue we're working on. Oh wait, let me back up. Did I say Title X does not cover abortion care either? So I think that's important to know about the Title X program, but they've tied it to Planned Parenthood because we are an abortion provider, so that's one of the reasons why they try to kick us out of the program, but it does not cover the cost of abortion or abortion care. So it's strictly preventative care, which I would think that the majority of members of Congress would support, but that doesn't seem to be the case either. But in terms of contraceptive care and birth control access, one of the things we're working on this session, specifically thinking about how to strengthen our laws and make sure our laws are explicit on who has access to birth control. It is the standard practice in Connecticut that young people can consent to birth control or contraceptive care and pregnancy-related care on their own without parental consent, without parental notice. That has just been how care has been delivered for decades and decades in the state of Connecticut. It's not explicit in our statutes. So again, one of the things that we are thinking about as advocates is how do we have the strongest laws in the nation so people can be guaranteed access. So there is a bill moving through the legislature right now, and I should know the number off the top of my head, but I'm gonna look it up. I think it's House Bill 7213, that would make it explicit in state law that young people, minors, can consent to contraceptive care and pregnancy-related care, because unfortunately we've been hearing stories of pregnant minors that have been denied pain management care in hospitals in Connecticut. We are now hearing that there have been young people that have been denied confidential birth control care at their school-based health center. So as we're hearing things change in Connecticut, we want to make sure that our laws explicitly protect the care that people have accessed historically in our state.
Anything? All right. The next question is a more legal one, I think. It took over 50 years to overturn Plessy versus Ferguson. All right, those of you who don't remember it. Equal access to education. All right. How long do you think it will take to reverse Dobbs and get us back to Roe?
I'm looking to you on this one.
Yeah. Obviously, I don't know. This country's not talking to each other right now. And there's no way we can ever have an honest conversation about healthcare and about families, and about what families need to not just support, but to do well and thrive. And I, just as somebody that has 3 children, 19, 16, 13, a working, hardworking spouse who makes much more than her husband does, so thank goodness. That's why they call it service, by the way. But we need health care, and we need the right to make decisions that are right for us to thrive and to do well and to make other financial and life decisions. And I think a lot of people aren't hearing that right now. And so we have to find a way, we have to fight right now. We have to fight like hell right now to hold on to our country. And that's not hyperbole. That's real. But I hope that at some point we will crawl out of this dark moment, and we'll have to find a way to sit down with people who don't see things the way that we do and have a conversation about why this healthcare is important to them too.
And I'm going to just put out into the universe, too, that when we come back and recover, which we will get through this. On some days I'm feeling very hopeless, but we will build the world, the country we want to see. And as a reproductive health and rights advocate, we want to build a world too that doesn't, limit access. And so we are dreaming of a world beyond Roe and better than Roe. And I'm saying that out loud to everyone I can as we're dreaming about what oppose Dobbs and getting, to the other side of Dobbs looks like, because we also know that Roe really was, restrictive, and it put limits. It kept the government in patients' decision making around their pregnancy. It wasn't an ideal, framework, and again, I'll let the attorneys weigh in on what I'm saying if they have a different opinion. But we know that it restricted access for people. There were still people across this country that couldn't access abortion, even when Roe v. Wade was the law of the land. And so we want to make sure that when we're building a future, that it looks like reproductive freedom means reproductive freedom for all people without limitations, without barriers, because abortion care is health care, and everyone deserves and needs access to the health care that they, regardless of who they are, regardless of where they live, regardless of whether or not their state government decides we're going to restrict it after the second trimester. So we want a new framework and a new vision where people get to determine what happens to their bodies and has full autonomy on that decision making around their pregnancy.
All right. I hate to throw cold water on this, but one of the questions we did get, and this is not from a red state, this is from someone in the audience. She says, what about the rights of babies in the womb? If it's in the womb, it's a fetus. But I would like to ask all 3 participants here, should a viable fetus have legal protections? The answer appears to be probably no from your point of view, but I'd like to know why you think that they should not, given that current Connecticut law does say that a viable fetus in the 3rd trimester is protected.
Look, this is about healthcare, folks, and this is about the right of a woman or patient and her partner and their family to make the best decision for them. And it's a decision that ultimately is between that woman or patient and her doctor. That's where this conversation begins and ends. We want You know, this isn't a competition of competing rights, and it is not anti-family, right? To have these honest conversations. You know, nobody has a right to accuse me of being anti-family. You know, every day I wake up and I do the best I can for my family and for my children. And all of us care about that, whether we have children or not. We want strong, healthy, successful, happy children who can thrive. And that comes from families that are empowered to make decisions that only they can make.
I think that was kind of beautiful, so I probably shouldn't add anything, but I will, of course, because you asked me my thoughts on this. And my thoughts are this decision is a personal, private decision. And when we're thinking about, especially when we're talking about abortion later in pregnancy, which I did bring up, so thank you for that question. This is, I think, a conversation that has been so politicized.
Yes.
And it has removed the humanity from people that need abortion later in pregnancy. It has stigmatized and shamed patients who, for the most part, usually people that need abortion later in pregnancy, it's because, again, they've been delivered devastating news, a health outcome that they had not hoped for. Or they live in a state now that's banned abortion, and they've had to wait to try to figure out how to get the resources, if at all, they can actually leave their home community to access care later in a pregnancy. That is the reality of the United States right now, where people cannot access health care that they need for their own life. You know, and I'm saying for their own life, it's not necessarily that their life is in danger, but in some cases we're hearing that, where patients are literally dying and having to leave their state to access abortion care because that's the care they need. So when we're thinking about rights, I think we have to think about the rights of the patient. And if this was any other medical procedure, I've been talking about abortion regulations a lot today, so that's why I'm going hard on this. If we were talking about any other procedure, we would never be even having this conversation because it would be between the patient and their provider. So I want to just leave with that point of we cannot stand for a country where the government is interfering in our most personal, private medical decisions. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about abortion care. And that's especially what we're talking about when we're talking about abortion later in pregnancy. These are, you know, family decisions, and these are decisions that only should be made between a patient, whoever they trust, and their healthcare provider.
Let me just add, Roe versus Wade came down the year I graduated from law school. There was a long period in my life, essentially between the end of elementary school and the end of law school, where I could not get a safe legal abortion. Mm-hmm. I remember the days of coat hanger abortions. All right. If they succeed at any level in shutting it down, we are not talking about ending abortion. We are talking about ending safe abortion. Women will die.
And this is a maternal health issue too. Like, this is about maternal health too, because we are seeing the states that have banned abortion, you know, are also the states that have the highest maternal mortality rates. I mean, this is really about not separating and isolating abortion from the full spectrum of reproductive health care and maternal health. And I think that's part of the vision of the future I hope for, that abortion is not isolated outside of full reproductive and maternal health care.
Okay. I'm going to make this question, which has been asked by a couple of people, the last one, because I'm told we're running low on time. And that is, what would you recommend, especially in terms of advocacy and lobbying, that women in this room and in this state can do to support the work that we're discussing tonight?
Two things. Tell your stories. Thank you for telling your story, you know? And I'm sure the number of women in your law school class, you could count maybe on one or two hands at that time. One.
Basically.
Yes.
They put, we were the first year that they'd had more than 5 women in my law school
Yeah.
class, and 3 of them quit within a week.
And let me just say, there's been a lot of half empty tonight. There's a lot of half full here too. There's a lot of strong women who a generation or two ago wouldn't be able to have this conversation and appear in a courtroom and fight for each other. And that's what we have to do right now, and you can do it. So tell your stories. The other thing I want to say, though, which I think is really important, is somebody asked a question about how we get back to a place where Roe or the law like Roe exists again. It obviously falls on our children, okay? But this is really important that you have this conversation with them, and that there are not a lot of young people in this room tonight, okay? That they reckon, there's a couple, they still don't know what Oprah and Donahue are, or payphone for that matter. But they have to have this. They have to have this conversation, and I don't just mean the young women. This is a little far afield, but what I'm most worried about. There are many things I'm most worried about, but one of the things of the 50 things I'm most worried about is this culture developing in our society around Joe Rogan and podcasts. It's hard to even describe it as toxic masculinity. It's taken on, it's metastasized into something else where it's okay just to think about you and to say whatever or do whatever the hell you want without regard to how it impacts everybody else, and to just be a total jerk. And I say this because I have 2 daughters, and God bless, they're doing well, but my third is my son. I have a 13-year-old boy who I'm trying to raise to be a man. What do I mean by that? Somebody who takes responsibility for his family, for his partner, right? For his community, and says, this is my fight too. That's what if there are parents out here, if there are siblings, that's how we get back to a place where health care is available for everybody.
And I'll add to that, I think it's so important to remember compassion,
Yes.
as the Attorney General just alluded to, but also hope. It's a really dark time we're in right now. There's a lot of things under threat, but hope is really essential, because if we give up hope, we stop caring. And if we stop caring, then just whatever happens, and we need to keep caring, and we need to keep hoping, even when it's really hard. And tell your stories to your legislators. We live in a state that's so supportive of rights, but they need to hear from you too, and they need to hear what's important to you. And our federal legislators as well. I mean, they're fighting for us to the extent that they can, and let them know what's important to you. And that really can make a meaningful difference.
I'm just going to echo what Alma said. Talk to your state legislators and members of Congress. So much is under attack, but from a healthcare perspective, Medicaid is under attack, under threat on the federal level. Talk to Representative Joe Courtney, your state, and senators and reps. Follow Planned Parenthood, please, online at PP Votes CT, so you know all the bills we're working on. We have until June 4th. June 4th? Yeah. To get this stuff done. So talk to your state legislators why Planned Parenthood matters to you, and make sure that they know that there is still work to be done in the state of Connecticut, because we oftentimes, we think that everything's good in Connecticut around reproductive rights. We have a lot more work to do. I'm going to put a special plug at the end. As you're talking to your state reps and senators about reproductive rights, make sure they understand the intersection to LGBTQ+ rights. There's a lot of ugly conversations happening at the state capitol, and I'm saying they're ugly because they're bringing in the hate from DC around an anti-trans sentiment that is very vocal, very loud in Hartford right now. And we cannot isolate the conversation, just like we can't isolate abortion from maternal health and reproductive health care overall. We cannot separate trans rights from reproductive rights. Bodily autonomy is bodily autonomy. We need to fight for everyone to be able to control their bodies, lives, and futures, and that means transgender folks. And there is an attack on trans folks in our state, and I'm very, very worried about the rhetoric that has come down into our state capitol. So I need you all with me when we're fighting for bodily autonomy to make sure that we are fighting just as hard for trans rights and trans folks to be able to control their bodies as well.
I would like to thank you all so much. This far exceeded our expectations. A wonderful panel discussion, and we're just so grateful that you all came. And I would like to remind everybody that that coming up this year are local elections. We are the League of Women Voters. As somebody referred to here, boards of education make decisions about how children will be handled in their schools with regard to trans rights, to access to health care. There are school health clinics. And so join us, the League of Women Voters, when we try to have debates and introduce the candidates. We are not partisan, but as you can see, we support issues very strongly. So our president of our state, one of our presidents of our state league, Joanne Moore, is here, and she's reminded me that we would love to have you join us. And you can just do that online. And what else should I say? That's it.
All right. Well, we are the League of Women Voters, and I'm sorry to keep you all even for a moment longer. You've already done so much for us. But let me just put a plug in to all of you constituents here. There is a bill in the U.S. Congress coming up called the SAVE Act, S-A-V-E, and it changes the way we would register to vote. And it requires you to bring your birth certificate to register, or a passport. If your name doesn't match what's on your birth certificate, perhaps because you got married, you won't be allowed to register to vote. Yeah. And think about college students going to register to vote for the first time on campus, away from home. They've got to call home and get their birth certificate. So it will really impede our access to the polls. And so please write to the administration in Washington right now. Next week is when it's going to go through the committee there. So you got to write right away, get it in the mail, and oppose the SAVE Act.
Thank you. Thanks. Important information. Thank you all for coming. Thank the Groton Public Library and all of you.
Thank you.